You've heard over the past 2 days and in our previous panel, there's both an excitement about the pace of scientific discovery and also an impatience that we're not moving fast enough, that we need to accelerate and focus our research efforts to develop and deliver desperately needed treatments to patients around the globe. But how to do that, especially when some of the problems seem resistant to conventional approaches, or as we say, refractory to therapy. One way that has spurred results in other fields is to provide incentives and offer prizes in open competitions. Prize-driven innovation has a long history. Let's take a look. Prizes have a long history of spurring innovations. As far back as 1714, the British government offered the Longitude Prize, £20,000 for a practical method of determining a ship's longitude. In 1795, Napoleon offered 12,000 francs for a better way to preserve food to feed his invading armies. But perhaps the best-known prizes have been in aviation. The British Daily Mail offered £1,000 for the first flight across the English Channel in 1909. And of course, there was the celebrated Orteig Prize. $25,000 went to Charles Lindbergh for the first solo flight across the Atlantic in 1927. Prizes are a way to draw innovators from around the world to attack problems they might not otherwise be focused on, essentially crowdsourcing innovation. But more importantly, a prize leverages the original investment into many multiples of the award money, and it's only paid out for success. So it's only natural that the prize model would eventually be applied to accelerate innovation and discovery in medical research. Here are some noteworthy examples in the medical field, in the words of the groups offering the prize.
The Qualcomm Tricorder XPRIZE is a $10 million competition to create a portable wireless device that monitors and diagnoses your health conditions, putting healthcare in the palm of your hand.
The Sanford Lorraine Cross Award brings to light the medical crusaders of today, who are following in the footsteps of those who came before. The rule breakers, nonconformists, mavericks, and innovators. Those whose passion for transformative change could not be contained. So now we make history by finding those whose eye is on the future of medicine and daring enough to make it come to life.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our panelists who know a thing or two about accelerating innovation and discovery via prizes and competitions. Please welcome to my immediate right, Dr. David A. Pearce, in the Cardinal's seat, Micah Aberson, and to his right, Dr. Peter Diamandis. So let's start out here, guys. Micah, tell me first, what inspired this Lorraine Cross? And just so it's clear to people, maybe you should tell us, because when I first heard it, I said, who is Lorraine Cross anyway?
Sure,
That's
great
not
question.
what it's about. Tell me what that really is.
So the Lorraine Cross is a symbol that's become synonymous with Sanford Health. We find it woven into the logo for our organization. It's really embedded into our brand. It's a symbol that goes back generations, centuries to medieval times, but also is consistent with healthcare across the country. It came over domestically into the United States as a part of tuberculosis hospitals and sat atop as sort of a beacon for hope, health, and healing. And we've adopted that, and consistent with that image, the Lorraine Cross being part of who Sanford Health is, we've named this the Sanford Lorraine Cross Award, which really finds its position and its inspiration on the shoulders of giants, the giants you've seen in the video, giants like the Nobel Prize. But more specific to Sanford, we suffer from a terrible disorder within our organization. It's one that we each sort of uniquely carry as individuals, but it's also one that pervades our organizational DNA, and that's a disorder of impatience, incredible impatience, that things don't move fast enough, that no matter how fast they move, it's not fast enough. coupled with that impatience is a notion, sort of a rallying cry for our organization, which is all built on the idea of finishing, to get something done, to get it across the finish line. That it's one thing to take something 70% of the way, but a unique individual is one that pushes all the way in and gets to that 100% mark. And so it's the combination of sort of this idea of our impatience coupled with the notion of finishing things that inspired the Sanford Lorraine Cross Award. We got together with our international board, who's represented here and will ultimately be the body that decides the winner. We're working actively now with a group of philanthropists who are rallying together to create an endowment that'll sustain the award in perpetuity. And on a biannual basis, starting in December of 2018, we're going to be awarding $1 million to somebody who has seen and experienced a significant breakthrough, who's finished something. It's not a lifetime achievement award. It's not an award to celebrate the end of one's career or to celebrate the publishing in academic journals. It's for something that's actually been done, for a maverick, a pioneer, somebody who, when needed, pushes through barriers to get the job done. Someone like Dr. Maurice Hillman, who wasn't always politically correct. He was a microbiologist, a vaccinologist, but somebody that got something done. And as a father of 2 little girls back home in South Dakota, I don't have to worry tonight that they're going to suffer from mumps or the measles because of what Maurice Hillman got done. And so it's that type of individual that we intend to celebrate with the Sanford Lorraine Cross Award.
And it's more for an individual as opposed to a problem or an accomplishment, if you will, or saying this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, it will ultimately go to an individual, but the way in which we're sourcing potential nominees for the award is actually starting with the problem that's being solved and focusing first on what are the advancements, what are the accomplishments that are being solved and being pursued. Dr. Pearce has assembled a great panel of scientific experts, some of whom are here, that are going to help advise us in this process and ultimately help us to get to a point where we can pivot from what's been solved, what's been accomplished, what's been finished, and then look at the individual that is chiefly responsible for that development.
Got it. Peter, you and the XPRIZE are clearly pioneers in innovation and using prizes to spur innovations. Tell me a little bit about that. How was that? How did that get started? And also, almost as important, how do you choose the problem that you want people to go after?
Sure. So we take a very different approach on prizes. It's an incentive-based prize. Our notion is that we're living in a world right now where small teams can do extraordinary things. And at the end of the day, if you are here and all of you are here to make an impact on the planet, there's something that you're unsettled with, unhappy with, you're not satisfied with the way things are, you have a couple of options to change that. You could find a researcher and back that single researcher. You can find a company and invest in a single company. And I think that's a reasonable approach. It's been a traditional approach, but it's a very linear approach. What if instead you said, I don't care where you went to school, what you've ever done before, if you solve this problem in a demonstrable, impactful fashion, like I see you do it, I will pay you $10 million or $100 million, whatever the value of the proposition is worth. Right? So what we do is we work with an amazing group of benefactors. In the group here, our Vision Circle members, our Innovation Board members. And we look at what are the world's biggest problems that governments or large corporations are not solving or are not making happen fast enough. And then we create a very clear set of rules. Say, you have to achieve A, B, C. Our first one was for space flight. I'm a kid who wanted to be an astronaut, gave up on NASA being my way to get there. And so I organized a $10 million prize, and I said, listen, here's $10 million of cash for the first team who can build a spaceship to carry 3 adults to 100 kilometers altitude, land, and within 2 weeks with the same ship, make the flight again. And that was won by a guy named Burt Rutan, funded by Paul Allen. And that $10 million prize drove $100 million in team expenditures and has arguably driven a multi-billion-dollar industry as a result of that. So our notion is, to all of you who want to make an impact on the world, and I think we should be living in a world where you're not, every one of us should claim, this is the impact I'm going to make During my lifetime, I'm going to feed 1 billion people. I'm going to create women's and girls' safety in Mumbai. I'm going to solve or cure this disease. And the question is, what is the tool that you can do that at scale? And I would say that, the solutions are not necessarily in the traditional places. I define an expert as who can tell me, exactly how something can't be done, right? The day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. Let me say again, the day before something is really a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. And unfortunately, large organizations, large institutions don't try crazy ideas because they can fail. But if you put up a large cash prize, you'll get hundreds of teams trying hundreds of crazy ideas, and you only pay the winner. How great is that? You only pay for success. So for me, this is sort of like the highest leverage, and we expect 10 to 50x leverage on your philanthropic dollars. You've all worked really hard to make your money, but yet when we give it away, we're happy with 30 cents on the dollar, which seems kind of strange to me. I'd rather have 10x on the dollar. So that's what we do. And to answer the last question, how do we select it? We have an event every October in California called our Visioneering. We pick 5 topics for the following year. This year, the topics include feeding 1 billion people. Tony Robbins is underwriting that. You'll hear from him tonight. We have one on uplifting farmers out of Africa. Gagan Gupta, our latest Vision Circle member, is underwriting that. We have one on saving coral reefs from Wendy Schmidt. We have one on reinventing energy at scale. And then we have one on predicting disasters. Can you predict an earthquake with much more time, or where hurricane's going to go? But we're also working on a large-scale early cancer detection, Alzheimer's, a number of prizes in the healthcare business. And so if you're interested in being part of our Visioneering, our Vision Circle event in October, it's mid-October in LA at the Terranea Resort. It's 3 days, really intensive, and have an idea for an XPRIZE that you're interested in, please come see me or my team who's here.
And bring your checkbook.
No, seriously, why not? And I'm unabashed about that, because if you've made your billions of dollars and you want to give it away, because what are you going to do with it otherwise? Why not leverage your capital 10x, 20x, and pay for success rather than for just hopeful?
Exactly. So David, let's talk for a second here. I think you and I could probably agree that scientists and researchers are not like other people. They're a little different, right?
I can speak as a PhD and say I tend to be
Likewise.
neurotic.
Likewise.
So,
But so do researchers respond better to this carrot approach, maybe, or a stick approach? What's the incentive, do you think, that drives more scientists, particularly scientists interested in this kind of innovation?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, Max. I mean, as scientists and researchers, we're often taught to chase money, to chase funding. We're only as good as the next application that we put in, the next publication for that. So I think looking down the road, the Lorraine Cross Award is going to be something that people will look at very differently in terms of an incentive. Micah alluded a little bit to the process that we have here, and we've been individual agnostic for this. So we used an algorithm, and despite the fact that we pride ourselves on not being too academic at Sanford, I think we may have to publish this because it's going to draw attention to the fact that what we did was devise an algorithm that just looked at all of the innovations in biomedical research and medicine over the last 5 years. And that algorithm sampled whether it was publications, grants, FDA approvals, clinical trials, and really built what were the most common areas of impact over the last few years. From that, then we basically identified those areas, and then in a blinded way, my panel of experts ranked these areas. We then took those areas and then put them into the top 15 or so areas that they're at right now, and then are ranking them for clinical impact, patient impact, really innovation. And then we'll have what I call the study section on steroids. So those of you who've been involved in reviewing grants, these individuals, I have an expert in pulmonology, I have an expert in cancer, I have an expert in infectious diseases. So there's 12 subdisciplines, 12 individuals that are internationally recognized for their areas are going to duke it out in terms of what was the most impactful type of study. only then will we identify the individual or individuals that were responsible for this. So I think the legacy will be that, wow, you may have a fair chance at winning this. You don't have to be part of an old boys club or an old girls club. You don't have to be part of an academic silo. It's a reciprocal way of identifying something impactful. And I think many people rising through the ranks in science, those postdoctoral fellows, those fellows in medicine can say, maybe I could actually win that prize.
But Micah, when we talk about awards or prizes, the Nobel Prize, the money there seems almost secondary. It's a recognition internationally that you're really something special. Is this award, is the money then really, in this case, at least for now, until you become as well known as the Nobel Prize, is that what really is driving, is that a significant driver for innovation in scientists and researchers?
Sure. So I would say for December of 2018, when we award and bestow upon the inaugural recipient the first award, the money is the incentive. I think different from other groups or granting organizations, there's no strings attached here. This is not a, hey, we at Sanford Health intend to take an equity position and want to build this to something. It's, congratulations, you finished something of tremendous significance, and we want to align our organization with you in that capacity. Here's your $1 million. Go do something else fantastic. And so year one, in December of 18, when we award the first one, which will be in Sioux Falls, the corporate campus for Sanford Health, inside a house that we called the Sanford House. It's a facility that we built in tribute to our main benefactor, who's given nearly $1 billion to our organization. It's a presidential library of sorts, if you will. Our international board will meet in there, deliberate, and then we'll walk out and make the announcement. But I'd say, Max, give us a little time, because in 10 years' time, I think that we could have a reputation and a brand that's credible on an international level.
You know, the whole idea here is we don't have that time. We want to accelerate and make things go faster. But okay, Peter, did you want to say something? I've got a question for you, but
go
I saw you light up your light.
No, it's just been on.
So,
I've got to turn off.
in terms of deciding what you were talking about, do you give more weight to sort of rare diseases, if you will, or smaller but difficult problems, or things that will affect many people? And tell me a little bit about some of the successes you've had so far.
And so this was our first space prize. We had 26 teams from 7 countries around the world who spent $100 million building different spaceships. Burt Rutan on the far right with Scaled Composites won that vehicle. We've launched $150 million worth of prizes. Another $200 million are in development. I once did a sort of mental study. I said, if I had $1 billion to give away, what would I do with it? And I said, I would probably identify the 10 biggest problems I want to solve in the world, and I'd launch 10 $100 million prizes. And at the end of the day, the cognitive calculation is that that would bend the universe in a way. That would bend where researchers do their research. It would bend where philanthropists pile on capital. If you had these sort of these large global mega XPRIZes, it would drive people, without a target, you'll miss it every time. So what XPRIZes do is they give the cognitive universe out there targets. How do you capture a graduate student's shower time, right? How do you start getting a person to fantasize? Like, the Nobel Prize is fine, but if I can also grab a $100 million XPRIZE and change the world, why not, right? I like to say that the best way to become a billionaire is help 1 billion people. So that's what we're striving for. We typically are only doing a number of XPRIZes at a time. I'll give one example. They could be small. Wendy Schmidt, Eric Schmidt's wife, the outgoing chairman of Google, when the BP oil spill occurred, James Cameron's on our board, and he said, we need to do something about this oil spill. We couldn't cap the spill in the Gulf, but we said, what if we could reinvent how to clean up oil spills faster? So we offered a prize for the first team who could double the rate of oil spill cleanup on the ocean before it's a coastline. The winning team increased it 600-fold. right? We have a prize going on right now, the Global Learning XPRIZE. Elon Musk put up $15 million of capital. Tony put up money. The Dick and Betsy DeVos Foundation put up another $7 million. And we're asking teams to build a piece of Android software that can take a child in the middle of nowhere who's completely illiterate and take them from illiteracy to reading, writing, and numeracy in 18 months on their own. So we had 700 teams enter this competition. We got it down to about 125 that delivered software, down to 5 finalists. Google gave us 8,000 tablets, and these 5 finalists are on tablets in Tanzania right now, in 141 villages. And the competition is going on right now, and these kids are completely illiterate. There's nothing. We put in solar stations, taught a few people how to charge the tablets, and the competition is going on. The winning software is going to be open source to the world, right? So we can create 1 billion teachers per year on every Android device that's out there. And so our goal is scale at that kind of a level, impact in that level. So Elon wanted to wipe out illiteracy, as does the DeVos Foundation and Tony Robbins, and so that's the mechanism that we're using for doing that.
Cool. So David, presumably you agree that giving a prize for innovation helps drive innovation. So where do you see this evolving? Are we going to see more prizes, bigger prizes? Is it really working?
We'll tell you whether it's working in December.
Okay.
But I think what will it drive? I mean, it's clearly going to drive innovation. It's going to recognize an individual for clearly finishing it. And what I hope it will do is will catalyze other groups as well, particularly health systems, to recognize that research is important, but research that impacts patients is far more important. So that's really one of the underlying messages here is that, so Micah gave a great example of Maurice Hillman. I'm asked often, give me some examples of someone, in the past who may have won this. An individual called Edward Jenner in 1796 scraped some pustules away from some scabs from cowpox, took that pus and injected it into a child and developed the first ever vaccine and ultimately eradicated smallpox. What this is about is maybe taking that slightly different approach. Now, of course, there was no IRB back then, but the maverick type of attitude and getting things, you can take a little bit of risk. You can encourage those ideas. I think what we're trying to partially get across here is that the individual that will win this isn't someone who's been doing this for years. It's not a career award. It's someone that took that idea and just really did something very special and made a great impact with it. And I fail to see how that won't catalyze other individuals to be inspired by it and other organizations to maybe follow our lead.
So we've got just about 6 minutes, so I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes here. And the question is, I have run into a couple of people recently who said these prizes, these are great. This is important. But please do not forget, this translational, something that we can actually deliver to people. But don't forget about basic research, because that's often what drives the actual innovation down the road. So are we missing something for basic research? I know the Nobel Prizes often do that. How do we spur those kinds of innovations that will lead to the Lorraine Cross and the XPRIZE types of awards?
Okay, I think basic research will absolutely not be excluded. What it will teach us to do, and I'm a classic example of that, a PhD that does bench work and then has that realization that you can do more. It's not just about solving a problem at the bench. It's solving a problem that can actually be put into a human being and make an impact. As PhDs, we're not often trained to think about that. So if you're a smart PhD now who wants to really make an impact, you find a partner and a collaborator to explain the medicinal impact of what you're doing and study something like that. So basic research, absolutely, if it's taken, it's translatable, it's translational. That's what we use, that's that term. Translational, in my book, is when you cure a mouse. Translatability is when you've actually cured a human, and that's what we're looking for.
Micah, rather than that, does this kind of prize innovation or prize incentive induce people to collaborate more, or does it make for more competition in silos?
I think the nature in which we're procuring our potential candidate pool is such that it really won't matter if they're collaborating or working in silos, because we're looking first for the development that's happening, and second for the individual. I think ultimately it's the nature of the business that people want to get together and collaborate, but there's still a little bit of protectionism maybe to say we're aggressively pursuing this where we're at. I think one of the things to the earlier question that I love about where we intend to go with this award is that our international board, the folks that are here today, aren't academics necessarily. They aren't researchers or PhDs necessarily. They're champions in their respective arenas. They're U.S. Open winners in golf. They're Olympians. They're physicians. They're CEOs, which means our award is going to be understood. My mom, who taught me my humility, taught school for 40 years, elementary music. And what makes me proud, thinking ahead to the night that we announce who our award winner is to be able to sit down with her and describe to her, this is what this individual did, and this is why it's meaningful. It's the presentation we heard 2 days ago from a little child that was blind and is now no longer blind. That's understandable, and I think people can really galvanize and rally around that.
But ultimately, what we've been talking about is collaboration. We want more of that. But as you said, you don't have to be a scientist to have the right ideas and the that spark of creativity that will actually make the difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Peter, I'm going to give you the last word here, as obviously one of the big innovators and funders in prizes. Where do you see this prize innovation landscape evolving over the, let's say, the relatively near future, next few years?
I think for me, again, each of us here who want to make an impact in our world, you're here because you want to cure something, you're here because you want to make an impact. It's another tool, it's a mechanism, right? And it's a mechanism to crowdsource to the world. 8 billion people are coming online in the next 5 years. 8 billion people with a gigabit connection speed, with access to 1,000 processor cores on AWS, with access to the world's information, with access to quantum computing, with access to AI, to access to 3D printing on the cloud. There are brilliant people out there, and I don't care where you work, most of the smartest people in the world work for someone else. So how do you access those brains and get them to focus on your problem? So Anu Jain, Naveen Jain, Paresh Galani, one of their interests, they're here in the audience, was women and girls safety in India. And they said, can we create an XPRIZE to create a device that a woman could wear, and within 90 seconds of her being harassed, there can be a mechanism to call, if you would, a support network to her safety right then there. The final judging just narrowed down to 5 teams in India. We'll be announcing the winner at the United Nations in early June. But it's not a, let's have an idea, let's write papers, let's try and find. There's a solution that's going to be announced in June for that will be scaled globally, right? So it's about immediate impact and leverage on your dollars. And I think that's a very powerful mechanism. And whether you do it with XPRIZE or on your own or on HeroX, doesn't matter. There's a lot of smart people out there with crazy ideas that are ultimately the real breakthrough versus the traditional organization that doesn't want to try that because it might fail, looks bad on their resume. So I want to just encourage you to think in a more, crazy manner. How's that?
And I think it's obvious we have a lot of smart people here in the audience, a lot of innovators. Guys, there's a lot of cash out there for you. Come up with some good ideas and submit it here. We'll make some money. All right? David Pearce, Micah Aberson, Peter Diamandis, thank you very much.
Peter at xprize.org.